So let's talk about the Corsair. I'm just kidding. I love the comments. You're not supposed to read the comments, but I love the comments. I do. But in the last video, we talked a lot about players kind of coming to grips with reality, right? And that was kind of, what we were discussing in the last video. And there's a lot of fanciful ideas that are going to kind of be brushed aside over time, and we're going to see that. But there is another confrontation with reality that is approaching. And the good news is that this time around, it's not players who are going to have to come face to face with reality. Rather, it's CIG. And the dark horse of this apocalypse is, in fact, the Hercules A2. This is going to be a monumental event for CIG, and I don't think they fully appreciate what they are about to put in the game. When people were talking about, full loot, someone will be able to steal my guns and armor, that was small potatoes. This is really the herald of the apocalypse, so to speak. Think about it this way. We know that Star Citizen is supposed to be a persistent universe, right? So you log off, the universe carries on, right? This is not a single player game that just starts and stops whenever you feel like playing. Now, though some people do try to push the limit, you can't play video games 24 hours a day, 365. As much as we would love to, you can't. You would die. But because of that fact, and the fact that we live in a world that has a 24-hour cycle, and which means when you're sleeping, somebody else is awake on the other side of the world or whatnot, it's entirely possible that someone could bring one of these things to your little parcel of land that you may have purchased, or your little base, or wherever you parked your ship when you logged off. Let's say you're like, oh, well, you know what? I'm already here on the surface of Yella, so I'm just going to go ahead and park my ship and just fall asleep in the bed, and then I'll continue on tomorrow when I come back. Your ship is still going to be there, right? And I mean, ultimately, that's what the universe is supposed to be, unless you store it away somewhere. And even if that does not remain the case, even if your ship does despawn, your base will always be there. And so something like this could come in and wreak untold havoc on that base while you're away, while you have no possibility of defending yourself. And this is what I mean, that when you think about what CIG is trying to implement, they're trying to implement a Conan Exiles or a DayZ or a Scum or, Ark or whatever survival game, one of these hardcore full loot survival games. They're trying to implement it into an MMO, and generally that's not, like, these are two areas that generally don't play very, very well together. One of the biggest problems with these ideas is that in order for it to work, in order for the PvP to really work, players, one, have got to have a low barrier of entry into that PvP, and you can't really have a system where players can be entirely wiped out by that system. I'm gonna cut myself into this video here because I realized towards the end of what I was saying, there is an example of this not working in a hardcore, full loot, asset loss, character can die MMO. This is something that has existed before, and it was ultimately just despised by the game community, and that is the Doomsday weapons of EVE Online. So for those of you who maybe don't remember, or those of you who weren't around, because we're going way, way back in time, when Titans first came to EVE Online, they had an ability, and each Titan from each different race had a different, visual effect, but ultimately it was the same result. You would be having a big fleet battle, and all of a sudden someone would, beacon in a Titan. The Titan would jump right into the middle of the battle, and then it would set off its Doomsday, and the Doomsday would essentially destroy. I believe it was limited to the enemy ships, but if I remember correctly, because we're talking over a decade here, all right? But Doomsday would pop in, like the Titan would pop in, it would set off its Doomsday, there would be a countdown, and then whoosh, and it would just hammer sometimes thousands of ships out of existence. It would just annihilate them, and it sometimes would crash the server too. But this was such a great system. Everyone thought, oh, what a great system, Doomsdays, and people were in such a rush to build Titans. And I remember being a part of that and helping build the Titan. I remember spending one entire night in a freighter running Titan components to a station where it was going to be built. That was a harrowing night when you're constantly afraid of pirates on your 0-0 trade route as you're running a freighter filled with Titan components back and forth and back and forth. It was a nightmare, but it was a fun nightmare. But once that Titan was built and it was just started, going around and just blowing things up and just devastating entire areas, it quickly became apparent that even though we were playing with the tool and we were using the tool, is that we were ruining the game. And we were ruining the fun of space battles, because space battles stopped being about, ships and fleets, fighting it out and who could call the best targets and all that sort of stuff. And it became just a waiting for the Titan to basically get beaconed into the battle. Was it a quantum beacon? Was that the name of it? Correct me in the comments below, because once again, over a decade. But I believe that ultimately was removed or drastically changed in a later version of EVE Online. But that was kind of one of the big reasons why I left that game, is because the fleet battles just weren't fun anymore. I came from an era where it was two fleets of battleships, and they were warping in and warping out, and they were just sniping at each other from long range, and they were picking targets, and it was these they felt like long drawn out affairs. Like you'd swear that you had been there duking it out with this other battleship fleet for like 3 hours, but really it had been 30 minutes. Or it was absolutely like white knuckle, and it was so much fun. And that was hardcore full loot PvP, but it was done right, and it was so great. But when you added in the Doomsday and the fact that a player could just basically appear and just boom and wipe out a whole bunch of players, it really took the fun out of it, and it kind of ruined the game. And when I look at something like this, that's what I see, is I see the EVE Online Doomsday. And you think about it, you could be having a big old ground battle, and then you're just waiting for who's going to fly the Hercules over and blow everybody up. And that's not really fun. I don't think that that's a good idea. I understand what CIG is trying to achieve with it. I understand what they're going for, but even if you think about the idea of installation destruction, obviously it's not going to work all that well in regulated space, and it's probably going to be a very difficult enterprise in regulated space. So if you're one of those people back in the 2016 or 2017 when we got the Pioneer, and the CIG was selling the parcels of land. If you own something like that and you're like, oh my God, this thing's going to come in and destroy my legal drug operation, like all this neon, I'm only making it to, it's medicine for blind orphans. Like, I don't think that, it's in regulated space, it's going to be very easy to pull off. But even in unregulated space, I do somewhat see a bit of a problem with this because, once again, it's a persistent universe. It's 24/7. The universe is running whether you're logged in or not. And someone could come in and drop a few of these on one of your bases and possibly wipe your operations out. So unless you get to the point where you can build like an exorbitant air defense that makes it virtually impossible, unless an entire armada arrives at your base, I think that there's going to be a lot of players who are probably going to be on the wrong end of this thing. And as much as it's bad news for the pilots who own it, I think it's also bad news for the players who are going to be on the other end. And I don't know how CIG is going to kind of balance this one out. I do kind of feel that by the time we get ground installations in some future patch, and we start really seeing the kind of devastation that this thing can kick up, this is going to be, as much as in the last video we talked about players confronting reality, this is going to be CIG having to confront reality. And unfortunately they're going to realize that, I think that they're repeating history, and they're making the same mistake that CCP made back in 2007, 2006, ? Corrections below in the comments. Once again, long time ago. I don't think that this is really all that hot of an idea. And watching the video that CIG put up, visually it looks super impressive, but I still think of the gameplay implications. And one of the things that I always try to tell people about Star Citizen who are worried about PvP is I use EVE Online sometimes as an example, and I say this is pre Dreadnoughts, pre Titans. PvP in EVE Online was just balls to the wall fun, and you were still losing your ship, you could still lose your implants, and it was just an absolute, it was fantastic. It was great, and there was so many great things that you could do when you really understood how the game systems worked and how the ships and all these things kind of work together. But when they started adding capital ships into the game, and especially with the Titans, it really started to ruin the game, like badly ruin the game. And I fear that that while we're not kind of in a very similar situation, I think that when I see the Hercules A2 and the Moab, to me that echoes the Doomsday device in EVE Online. And I think that when players start finding themselves in a situation, possibly repeatedly, where it's not so much about me fighting the other player, but it's about me just looking at my watch and just saying, like, how much longer before the Hercules shows up and just wipes us all out, I don't think the players are going to resonate well with a mechanic like that. I think that it is not the best of ideas. And so this is kind of one of those moments where one of CIG's kind of fanciful ideas, unfortunately, confronts reality, much like hover mode, and they realize that it was a bad idea to begin with. The unfortunate side of it, of course, is the fact that they went ahead and sold it before they really kind of thought about what they were doing. Anyways, my 2 cents. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.